Tonight on Primetime Politics, shifting poll numbers. With 2 weeks left in the campaign, some polling firms are noting a tighter race. But is it enough for Conservatives to overtake the Liberals? And how influential will this week's French and English language debates be in the race for electoral support? Coming up, polls analyst Éric Grenier will break down the latest numbers for us, and former campaign strategists will tell us how the parties are preparing for the leaders' debates. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, we're just 13 days away from election night, and while the polls have been relatively stable for the past 3 weeks with the Liberals ahead, recent numbers over the weekend seem to suggest the race was tightening up. Main Street Research standing out yesterday with a survey that showed Conservatives leading for the first time in this campaign. But that company's latest numbers came out today, and the Liberals are back on top again today. So what can be made of these fluctuating results? Okay, well, let's get into the numbers right now. Éric Grenier is the founder and the writer behind the Writ. Hello, Éric.
Hello.
So, your top line numbers still show a Liberal lead at 44.1% of decided voters, Conservatives at 37.9%, New Democrats at 8.2%, the Bloc at 5.3%. But, up against this are those Main Street numbers that came out yesterday. Unlike your average, they did have Conservatives in the lead at 43%, Liberals at 40%. What's happening here?
Yeah, we are seeing that there is some disagreement from one poll to the next. We did see that after showing that 2-point lead for the Conservatives yesterday, Main Street Research was out this morning showing a very small lead for the Liberals in the tenths of a percentage point. So I think we're at a stage of this campaign where we are going to start seeing a little more of this variation between polls, because while the consensus does seem to be more around a 6-point lead for the Liberals, we saw that in a number of polls that came out in the last day or so. We are going to see, I think, now and then some polls that are going to show that closer race. And I think it is a sign that, one, things are a little bit more volatile perhaps now as we enter this stage where there's going to be the debates that are going to have a huge impact on public opinion. But also, I do think that the margin has gotten a little tighter. Earlier on in the campaign, roughly around the second week of it, it did seem that we were starting to see more of these polls that once in a while had the Liberal lead at 9, 10, 12 points. That seems less and less prevalent now. So I think once we get to this range where the Liberals might be more around the 6-point lead, once in a while I think we are going to see some polls that are going to be more on the smaller side of that rather than on the bigger side of it.
Okay, so a tightening, but when you take the average, is still a Liberal lead of a few points. What about regionally, though, Éric? What are you seeing there that might help us understand what's actually taking place at the ground level?
Yeah, I think the most important region, and it's no genius thing to comment on it, is Ontario. But I think it's because what we've seen in the polls in Ontario is pretty significant. While we have seen that in some surveys receive more of that 5, 6, 7-point lead for the Liberals nationwide, in Ontario, all the polls are still showing that the Liberals have a bigger lead than they did in the last election, and in many cases even more than they had in 2015 when Justin Trudeau won his majority government. So while we are in that scenario where the national race might be starting to look a little bit tighter, in Ontario, it's still, on average, a double-digit point lead for the Liberals. And as long as they are able to hold that, that puts them in a position to certainly win the most seats, and it gives them a very high chance of a majority government, because we know that they're still leading by big margin in Atlantic Canada, in Quebec as well, and have some inroads in Western Canada I don't think we'd expected to see. So Ontario is always where elections are decided, but in this one, I think it's where the Conservatives are really hitting up against a brick wall that they haven't been able to break through. That was one of the failings that Andrew Scheer and Erin O'Toole had in the last few elections, unable to get into the GTA. And we're seeing the same kind of thing happening to Pierre Poilievre in this campaign. Okay,
so if you take all of that you said, the numbers included, you crunch that into the poll tracker that you're doing for the CBC, what are you finding in terms of seat projections?
Yeah, with the kind of numbers we see across the country, the Liberals are, as I said, favored to win a majority government. We project that they probably win somewhere around 198 seats. There is a bit of a range on that, of course. It could be a lot smaller than that, could be a little bit bigger. But the Liberals are clearly in that majority territory. The Conservatives, with the current numbers we see, really on track to more or less re-elect what they had last time. Maybe pick up a few NDP seats here and there, but still being around that 120, 125 seat range. The Bloc Québécois, with the numbers we've seen in Quebec, could see their caucus cut in half, especially in the Montreal area, and the NDP is still struggling. Some of the polls we saw today, there was one, the Main Street survey had them at 6%. We still see lots of polls with 7, 8, 9% support for the NDP. So I think whoever gets elected for the New Democrats in this election, it'll primarily be because of the name on the ballot and not the color of the party.
Okay, so more the local candidate than the actual party itself. So, when you look at the numbers, Eric, we're now roughly 2 weeks away from Election Day. What do you see as the main challenge for Liberals at this point? What's the main challenge for Conservatives? Because this has essentially boiled down to a two-party race.
Yeah, I think so, and that is probably the biggest challenge for the Conservatives, that the NDP and the Bloc do not seem at this stage able to get back some of the vote that they have lost since the last election. That vote is not going to go to the Conservatives. So for the Conservatives, the inability for Jagmeet Singh or Yves-François Blanchet to get in this campaign is really one of the biggest challenges for them, because the Conservative support, as we've mentioned throughout this election, is higher than it's been in the last few campaigns. For the Liberals, I think the challenge is to maintain where they are right now. I think we're starting to see some indications that the vote, I wouldn't say softening, but that the trend line is not pointing towards bigger leads for the Liberals. And we're starting to see on the personal level for Mark Carney, while he's still beating Pierre Poilievre on the major issues that Canadians care about in this election, and he's still beating him on questions of preferred prime minister and things like that, the margins aren't nearly as big, or at least as big as they were maybe a week or two ago. So I think that really puts the spotlight on these debates, in that for Mark Carney, his trend line is still relatively stable, but maybe softening a little bit. So if he does not meet expectations in the debates, that could prove to be a vulnerability for the Liberals.
Vulnerability, but can it swing the other way? Because, we talked about it before. To win, the Conservatives need to do more than just even up with the Liberals. They need to exceed the Liberals in terms of national numbers and regional numbers. Can that happen in the course of one English and one French debate?
It would be pretty historic, I think, if it did. I think more what's at stake is more along the lines of whether the Liberals will win a majority or minority government, and for the Conservatives, it's whether they can make that increase their odds there. For the Conservatives to get into a position where on Election Day or the day before it, we'd say they were the favorites to win the most seats, the swing in the polls would need to be somewhere around 10 points nationwide. That is a lot in 2 weeks. It's not impossible. We've seen that kind of thing happen before, but it doesn't just happen organically. There does have to be a big moment in the debate. Either Pierre Poilievre really hits it out of the park, or Mark Carney really falls flat on his face. I don't think, if it's a debate where afterwards those of us are watching it saying, "Oh, I'm not sure if I saw anything that's going to change the dial here," that's not going to be enough for the Conservatives. They really need to have a really stellar last 2 weeks of this campaign in order to get back into it and have a chance of winning the most seats on Election Day. Okay, well, you and I will be speaking together during the English language debate. I look forward to that. But for now, Éric Grenier, thank you for this. Thanks.
Okay, well, let's pick up on the debates now. The first will be tomorrow's French language debate, and the Debate Commission has released the themes to be discussed. They include the cost of living, energy and climate, the trade war, identity and sovereignty, and immigration and foreign affairs. Now, the English language debate will be Thursday night, and the themes for that debate will be affordability and the cost of living, energy and climate, leading in a crisis, public safety and security, and tariffs and threats to Canada. Okay, well, let's talk about the upcoming debates. Michele Cadario is the CEO of Vanguard Strategy, a former national campaign director for the Liberals. Jordan Paquet, vice president at Blue Sky Strategy Group, was deputy campaign manager for the PEI-PC party in the last provincial campaign. And George Soule, former communications director for the NDP. Hello to all three of you.
Hello.
Hi. So, here we have the French language debate followed by the English language debate. I'm going to quickly go around the table. When you think about your respective leaders, talk to me about what you think is going to be their biggest challenge, either for both or for each. Michele?
Well, certainly for French, for Mr. Carney, it is the language. But I think that the expectations are pretty low right now. And he made it through to Le Monde en Parle, so it'll be interesting to see. I think that people will be looking for him to be very substantive. And just given his facility in the language, can he be as substantive in that one as in English? And then in English, I think that he's just got to not be prickly. and to make sure that people are going to be coming after him, and it's a very different environment for someone who is not used to politics cut and thrust. And so I think it's really going to be about tone and attitude and just presence is going to be the most important, because he's got absolutely the substance. It's much more about how he comports himself.
Okay, Jordan, when you think about Mr. Poilievre?
Sure. So I think obviously Mr. Poilievre has tons of debating experience, many years in the House of Commons as a minister. He's used to that cut and thrust. So at this point, he's now running for Prime Minister. To be able to take that step back and look prime ministerial, act and look the part. Of course, he's still going to have to take some swings at Mark Carney and try and knock him off his game a little bit, but still be able to step back and still deliver those clear and concise statements that the Canadians are looking to hear. We're heading into the last couple of weeks of the campaign. The Conservatives are feeling some momentum, I think, as certain polls are looking at. So to do that, to really to just put his best face on and deliver kind of things in a clear, positive, concise tone on his version.
Do you think he has more leeway in the English debate than he does in the French debate?
I think so. I mean, he certainly, he's not as known perhaps throughout Quebec as he is in the rest of English Canada. So I think there's certainly some opportunities there that he has in French to go a little bit harder, perhaps take up a little more airtime than some of the others who don't perhaps know the language as well. But it's the English one for sure that I think everyone's going to be watching.
Mm-hmm. George, what do you think about Mr. Singh?
Well, first of all, I want to say I think those two analyses were quite accurate. So, I mean, to be honest with ours too, I think the first thing that Jagmeet has to do is prove that he deserves to be on that stage, and particularly among the top three. I think that also in both languages, he's going to have to punch through a bit and be remembered and kind of, again, make his point to kind of break up this idea of this being a two-party race in this election. And I think also challenging Mr. Carney on some of his experience and reminding folks that while Mr. Carney, is the Liberal leader, he's not the same kind of Liberal leader kind of on the progressive side of things, but rather more on the right side of the center of the spectrum. So really pushing him on some of that experience, some of that his tax havens, and really push him to show that if you elect more New Democrats, that Jagmeet will continue that work to force this Liberal government to be more progressive.
So I wonder how you prepare then for that, because when you talk about if Mr. Singh's task is to push Mr. Carney on things like tax haven, and in the past, to use your word, Michelle, Mr. Carney gets prickly. Whenever he gets a topic that he doesn't want to talk about, he immediately goes to prickly, it breaks the veneer that he has. How do you prep the Liberal leader to make sure that side of him does not come out?
Well, I got to say, debate prep, I don't know what you all experience, it is miserable. Like, there is nothing worse than that. And you feel for the candidate, because you have half a dozen people in there or more picking at every single word and nuance and how you're standing, how you're positioning things, and tearing each sentence apart. And so you have to get into a rhythm. And for the first leaders debate, having been through it with Mr. Martin, there's nothing to prepare you for that. But that's what's necessary, is preparation. He has to watch video of himself when he has been those questions put to him, to understand how that is not necessarily something that looks prime ministerial, and it's not what's expected of the leader. And so I think that it's just being very, very practiced. But at the same time, not over practice. You have to be loose enough to be able to have a personality, and loose enough to be able to understand what's going to be happening on the stage, and kind of take it as it comes. So, for me, it's always looking at the videotape to see yourself, as miserable as that is.
Well, and of the three, Mr. Carney is the one without the national experience debating in front of the camera. Pierre Poilievre, not as leader, but certainly in the House of Commons, and he, went through a much longer leadership process than did the Liberals in choosing Mr. Carney. How do you deal with nerves? Because I can imagine for anyone in that position, never in this national spotlight, in French up against people who speak better French than him, in English up against people who are more used to debating politically than he. How do you deal with the nerves?
Well, I actually don't think that he'll have nerves with respect to substance, right? Like that's the one thing that he has to be able to rely on, is he knows this stuff. You know, he can talk about the economy like no one else probably in the country. And so I think that that will give him a little bit of comfort on that. And he has been on the campaign trail consistently for the last 3 months. So that's also kind of helped out for sure. But I would say that, you know, for Mr. Poilievre, that is also very much a first-time debate for him. You know, Mr. Singh's been there a number of times, but that first debate is just quite something. He made it through tout le monde en parle, as I said, which was probably the most stressful thing to do in French, and he came out okay. So I think that that will also give him a little bit of confidence going through.
Okay, so if Michele uses the word prickly that Mr. Carney has to be worried about, what word do you use to describe what Mr. Poilievre has to worry about when he's up on that stage?
Sure, you don't want to come across too much of an attack dog. You don't want to look like the opposition leader when you're running to be prime minister. And that's going to be the challenge, is bridging that gap and making it look like it. Luckily now, Mr. Poilievre has faced pretty intense debates, not at this level, but during the CPC leadership against Jean Charest, who's quite a debater himself. So I mean, at least he was able to kind of have the experience of going through that. So yeah, he's going to have to be able to kind of step back and you know, making his clear statements. And the challenge is always boiling it down. It's one thing to be able to explain the economy, you know, for 5 minutes in a lecture, but to break it down into the, you know, the 1 minute clip that you have at the 30 seconds to really get that to stick. I think that's going to be the challenge for everybody in that first particular debate.
I wonder though, because you know, in using the example of tout le monde en parle, you know, Mr. Poilievre gets up there, and immediately the first question is about his personality and whether or not he comes off too abrasive, and is that really him? And that is in a polite sphere. In a sphere where you're up against political opponents who are going to want to draw that out of you, how do you prepare for that?
Sure, and I think he's been doing that quite a bit more. I mean, one thing, like in these practice sessions, as we were talking about, they're not fun. They can't be fun for the candidate. I've never been the candidate, but I've done, you know, the prep work before. And I mean, you really try and get under the, if you're doing them any favors, you really got to try and get under their skin during that session, and it can be uncomfortable. You know, when you're there pushing your own boss to try and throw them off their own message, but that's what you have to do in a prep session. They've been putting him out on much let's say lighter, kind of showing a more human side on some recent podcasts that have been getting some great reviews across social media as well, kind of showing that he's, you know, he is a father, he's a husband, and just kind of his upbringing as well. So I think those types of things, thinking back to it, will ground him quite a bit to at least he's been talking about those things.
Okay, so how do you then prep Mr. Singh? Because I hear what you're saying about trying to punch through and make it and stake a ground that the Liberals have shifted away from under Mr. Carney. But I would think one of the hardest things to prepare him for is how to break through, have a message, and not be ignored.
Well, and certainly in this particular debate, the rules are that they can go in with a sheet of paper and a pen, and that's really all they get. You know, sometimes you see people debating, flipping through like a phone book size. I'm dating myself, a phone book. A phone book. They used to put your numbers in a book they gave to everybody. And flipping through the binder for topics, and in this case, they won't have that. So in some ways, what it really is about is just remembering those few key lines. So again, there's all this. You do all this debate prep. You do the play of having all people playing all the other characters, and you do all that work. But one of the things that's done, and one of the things I've mostly spent my time on in prep, is a few lines that'll punch through. So either, and again, both the other gentlemen definitely have that kind of prickly side to them, and so trying to find a way to poke that. Some of those are there. Also, you want a good line that'll stick, you know, with people to remember on a positive side as well. You know, some of them are silly sometimes. Jack Layton, you know, that's a hashtag fail. Watching like a 70-year-old man kind of stumble through saying hashtag fail in 2011 was a bit awkward for us in the room. We all kind of winced at it, but it punched through and Canadians liked it, right? So there's kind of those human moments too. It really is about having a few lines. You get through the whole debate, but hopefully you have a couple lines that really get through. Okay, listen, I literally only have a minute, so a quick go around. Who do you think is going to have the toughest time in this debate? Michele, start us out.
I think Poilievre. I think he's got to disregard his personality and actually try and not be that attack dog. I think that's going to be the hardest thing for him.
I think Mr. Carney, just sure he has the education and whatnot. He just doesn't have the debating experience, and we've seen him under pressure, under questioning. He gets quite angry, and that could take him down a couple points.
Okay, George.
Well, I have to agree with Michelle that Mr. Carney did extremely well on Tout le monde en parle, so I think he'll do better than people think in the French tomorrow night. Jagmeet is actually sick, had to cancel some interviews today, so he might have a tough time trying to get through if he's feeling any better tomorrow. But I think all of them have their own challenges, to be honest. So I think if Jagmeet can get through the sickness, then we'll see where it goes from there. Okay.
Well, we are watching, and I'm going to note the fact that when I asked Jordan to choose a word for prickly for his own candidate, he did not. Michelle, Jordan, George, thank you very much. And one programming note on the French language debate tomorrow. Late today, it was announced that the start time has been changed, and that's because with the Montreal Canadiens playing a consequential game tomorrow night, Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet asked for a time change. He was backed up by the NDP leader who wanted a different day altogether, but the French language debate will now start at 6 p.m. Eastern time, so a bit earlier instead of the original 8 p.m. Coverage here will start as a result at 5:45 p.m. Eastern. And Thursday, for the English language debate, the start time does not change. The debate starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, and our pre-show starts at 6:30 p.m. Yes, hockey, and only in Canada. Okay, well, let's turn our attention now to Honda Canada, because the day did start out with a bit of a shock after a Japanese news outlet, the Nikkei, reported Honda was planning to move some production out of Canada and Mexico to avoid Trump's tariffs on vehicles built outside the United States. But that report was denied by the Ontario Premier and later Honda Canada. Then late this afternoon, this statement from the Industry Minister Anita Anand, she writes, I just finished a productive meeting with the CEO of Honda Canada, Dave Jamieson. He confirmed that Honda remains fully committed to its operations in Canada and that there are no plans to shift production elsewhere. Canada has the best workers in the world and is a global leader in auto manufacturing. She goes on to say, we will continue to work with all auto manufacturers to protect Canadian jobs and to build a strong, resilient auto sector here in Canada. Well, Honda Canada operates 2 plants in Canada. Both are in Alliston, Ontario. And to talk about this, we're now joined by Richard Norcross. He is the mayor of New Tecumseh, the town in which both those plants are located. Mayor Norcross, thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you very much for having me, sir. Greatly appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you. Listen, I want to begin with, the news with Honda saying that they're not going to shift production at this point. How much comfort do you take from that? How much comfort should Canadians and workers in your community take from that social media post?
Honda has been a valued partner in our community since 86. They have built over 10 million vehicles here. They are the best community partner you could ever ask for. They've been there with us the entire time. They're always there. They're always helping our community. You know what? I know they're going to protect their workers. I know they're going to protect our community. I know they're going to work with us to make sure that we do a great job and we have the best community in the world.
So you have faith in Honda. What kind of economic impact would losing Honda have on your community?
We're a community of 45,000 people. Of the 5,000 people that work at Honda, 75% live in either the town of New Tecumseh or Simcoe County. That's how we're governed. And it would be dramatic because, we also have spin-off plants. We have all kinds of, we have trucking companies, we have restaurants, we have everything. So as the mayor of the town of New Tecumseh, we're not going to let them leave. Whatever they want us to do, we'll do. Whatever needs to be done, we will make sure that it happens. Because you know what? It's a complete community.
Were you worried this morning when you saw the news?
No, actually I wasn't, because they have been a great community partner. They have been absolutely fantastic. I speak to them like every week, every 2 weeks. They are committed to our town. They're committed to the province of Ontario. They're committed to Canada. And more importantly, and I think the most important thing, is they're committed to the people that have invested their lives working there. And I believe them when they say that.
You know, as you say that, I do want to pull up here a statement from Honda Canada, and they did go fully into their reasoning and essentially their denial on this. I'm going to ask the control room to put up this board from Honda Canada, and as you go into that board, in the middle, this is what they say: we will operate at full capacity for the foreseeable future, and no changes are being considered at this time. So yes, some comforting words there, but I do wonder, Mayor, because are you concerned about future investment? Honda had intended to build, for example, an EV assembly plant in your community, a battery plant in your community. Are you afraid those plans will either be canceled or shelved because of what's happening with Donald Trump?
Well, thank you for the question. We have been working, we dedicate ourselves to Honda. We have dedicated employees to Honda. It's a $15 billion investment in our community. And remember, we're 45,000 people. And we continue to go forward. We continue to work on what's necessary. We get the proper permits. So no, we're not concerned at all. And from what we've heard from Honda is we don't have any official information from Honda. The news never came from them. And in speaking with them today, and I speak to them quite regularly, you know what? Keep going forward. Keep going. Let's get this, let's make this happen. And we will do what's required of us.
So you spoke with them today. What did they tell you?
They're going forward. They're protecting their investment. They're protecting their employees. You know, I got to be honest with you, sir. They were so concerned about their employees. They were so concerned about the people that invested their lives in working for them. And they want to make sure that those people do not have a worry. And my response on behalf of myself as the mayor, the town of Tecumseh, and all our staff is whatever we can do to help, we're going to make it happen. And we will make it happen.
Now, of course, the report today, I think, goes to a deeper worry that Canadians have right now about industry. And, you know, it followed the news from Stellantis suspending a shift in Windsor, as well as GM suspending shifts in Oshawa. With you being so reliant on Honda, I'm kind of wondering, with Donald Trump's tariffs existing as they are, what do you think the federal government needs to do to make sure automakers, whatever the national background is, remain in Canada?
It's real simple. I'm the lower level of politics, but I'm the one that connects deeply with the people, and I affect them deeply because we're the ones who make those decisions. What I'm trying to say and what I have said to our federal government, our provincial government, you know what? Let's just sit down and talk. Like, let's work this out. Let's find a resolution. Let's find a solution, because I believe we can. And that's what we have to do.
Richard Norcross, I appreciate the time today. I know you were patiently waiting as we went through the debate, and you smiled when we talked about it.
Thank you, sir.
You smiled when we said that the hockey was going to delay the French debate tomorrow. So I appreciate everything from you this evening. But Richard Norcross, Mayor of New Tecumseh, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Well, and that is our program for this Tuesday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics, because of the move of the French language debate, will not be on tomorrow or Thursday night, but we will be back with full coverage of the English language debate. Catherine Lafrance will anchor our coverage of the French debate tomorrow night. And you know what? Catherine Lafrance is up next avec l'essentiel. Bonsoir.